The Madman!
It has been a while. Welcome to a Trump deck teachings, and boy do I have a good one for you this time around. So what Blister Guy has done here is arrange in chronological order kind of the development of a deck called Discover Mage. None of these decks are better, air quote, than any other version. It's just the changes have been made to adapt to the current meta. There are still changes being made to this deck. People are performing well in ladder with slight alterations on each one. And to some extent, it's good to be wily, and it's good to be nimble, and it's good to have like some surprises in there. So Cy Gunther is the guy who first started off creating this archetype, and this was a completely new archetype. It's certainly not Freeze Mage, even though it has 2 Ice Block in it, and it literally has nothing that freezes other than Frostbolt. And it's not Tempo Mage because it's actually a value deck. It runs high cost cards such as Medivh being a constant mainstay in this deck, and the main way to get value. So it's some kind of mix between a Tempo Mage and a Freeze Mage. For the most part, it's a Control Mage. What you're looking to do is you're looking to trade your cards pretty efficiently. Your Meteor and your Flame Strike will usually kill more than 1 card's worth, and your Firelands Portal will usually both get a card and kill a card. Your Medivh is going to get 3 serious threats on the board, ideally, and your Primordial Glyph just happens to play a serious threatening spell much earlier than expected. You get a lot of value with Arcanologist digging up Ice Block all the time. It's 2 mana 2/3 which draws a card. That's amazing. The Ice Blocks keep you alive to burn for the end. Medivh's Valet is extremely efficient when you have the Ice Block down, since it's 2 mana 2/3 deal 3 damage. You start off strong with cards such as Babbling Book and Mana Worm and Arcanologist. You play on curve, you get value, and then at the end eventually you win with the value train of Medivh, or you Alexstrasza your opponent and burn them down from there, or even without the Alexstrasza you just burn down your opponent eventually through time. And you keep safe with an Ice Block. It's a very flexible deck, and there aren't that many bad matchups. It's kind of like the average deck right now. Generally good against everything, with the notable exception of Jade Druid. It is very bad against Jade Druid. And while you can tech it in a way to beat Jade Druid, you really should be playing another deck instead if you expect to be facing a lot of Jade Druids. There are 27 supposedly core cards in this deck. I'm actually going to say there are 26 core cards, possibly even 25, by eliminating one of the Cabal Carriers. So at the beginning, there was Cy Gunther, and he made the deck, and had 2 Cabal Carrier, and had 2 Primordial Glyph, and it was kind of Discover Mage. It was just generally good against everything. The Medivh provided extreme value at the end. And most of the lists follow that kind of pattern. Senf Glass with a particular version, a little bit more saucy, 2 Sorcerer's Apprentices. This makes it more like Tempo Mage, allows for a more greater chance to beat the opponent down early with a good draw. In and out of popularity have been Polymorph, which is really good against certain classes such as Rogue, which can put out a big Edwin Van Cleef. Paladin especially, since you can hit very key targets such as Tyrion Fordring. Volcanic Potion is a very good tech against aggressive decks. Gluttonous Ooze is seen in and out of quite a few of these. It's clearly good against Tyrion, it's clearly good against Pirate Warrior, and it's good against Hunter as well. Some of the more unique choices in these deck lists include Elise the Trailblazer, which, by the way, in my opinion, is an extremely bad card to put in the deck because you don't actually cycle enough to get to it. Reynad putting in a Black Knight in the DreamHack Austin tournament, aiming against Taunt Warrior as well as a variety of other taunts such as Tar Creeper, which can show up. I ran Eldorian's list, and I actually came up with it completely independently from Eldorian. It's like one of the most streamlined versions, I'd like to say, with 1 Volcanic Potion, 1 Meteor, 1 Flame Strike. It really just hits the gamut of everything while also still running 2 Babbling Book and 2 Courier. We see some other interesting options such as Blizzard, Pyros, Harrison Jones, and Eater of Secrets. And in tournaments, actually, Harrison Jones has been really good because there are a lot of classes that use weapons. And most surprisingly, there's Mage. Harrison Jones is one of the best cards against this deck because you can kill off their Medivh at Tiesh and draw 3 cards while you're at it. Eater of Secrets, also obviously a tech card, intended to be used in this mirror exactly as well as against Freeze Mage, and has some upside against Paladins, which always run Hydrologist. So generally with this deck, you're either looking to be even greedier. If you're wanting to be more greedy, you add cards such as Cabal's Tome and Archmage Antonidas and at least the Trailblazer, I suppose. That's like on the extreme side of greed. And if you want to not be greedy, you add in anti-aggro cards such as Volcanic Potion and Gluttonous Ooze. And if you want to play it in a more aggressive style, you add in 2 Sorcerer's Apprentices. So I'm a man of statistics, so what version of Discover Mage is the best to run? Well, thanks to the people at hsreplay.net, they have actually managed to come up with exactly that answer. You can sort through all of the Discover Mages out there and figure out which one actually literally has the highest win rate percentage based off of a decent game size sample. This was the deck that I brought to DreamHack Austin and placed 3rd with, and it's still a very good deck, and I actually consider this to be basically the solid deck. No surprises, it can beat pretty much everything, and I'd say this is like the true average middle of the line deck right now. It is fair to call it a jack of all trades, master of none. This list is currently performing the best out of all the Discover Mages on the ladder, with one notable exception. There's one list out there which is currently running 1 Gluttonous Ooze over 1 Cabal Courier, and that is actually getting a higher win percentage. For the case of demonstrating what seems to be the average Discover Mage deck though, this is what you can generally expect to face. So out of the cards that aren't core here, the Babbling Book, the Volcanic Potion, and arguably Cabal Courier, those are the cards that you can expect to get switched out for tech options, or for interestingly aggressive options, or for interestingly greedy options. But in this case, this has a mix of basically leaning more towards anti-aggro, since it has the 2 books, and the books aren't that anti-aggro, they're just generally good filler cards. It does run the 2 Cabal Courier, and it has a Volcanic Potion. I actually think a Volcanic Potion is extremely good, just as one of the cards that you can completely flatten aggro with. The mulligans for this deck are very straightforward. You want to keep every card that's 2 and under, except Blood Mage Thanos. And yes, you want to keep Medivh's Valet even without secrets, and you're often going to be playing that on 2 against aggressive decks. If you already have a 1 and a 2, you might want to consider a 3, because this deck likes curving. So yeah, that looks pretty good. That's what you're looking for. A 1, a 2, and a 3. Not the best 2 possibly, because it's either Taunt Warrior or it's Pirate Warrior. Against Pirate Warrior, I'll play the Valet as a 2-mana 2/3. And the Cabal Courier is good against Taunt Warrior, but not against Pirate Warrior, but I'll keep it anyways, because 1, 2, 3, perfecto. The goal of the deck is to do 1, 2, 3. You go with Book or Worm on 1. On 2 you go Arcanologist or Valet or Glyph or Frostbolt sometimes. On 3 you go Intellect or Courier or a Secret. And it's useful to discover, it's really useful to develop those secrets so that the Valets are active. And also it's surprisingly difficult to find the mana for them later.
Out of my jungle!
Something that might sound surprising is I did mention that this deck is only bad against Jade Druid, and I still basically stand by that. It's surprisingly good against Taunt Warrior. I don't think it's immediately obvious that it is decent against it, since this deck goes a while and it's a value deck, but it eventually gets there. One of the big things about this deck is figuring out which cards to discover. I mean, since you have so many cards that get you random cards, or cards that you can pick.
What to do?
I'm going to turn 4 and I have no turn 4 play, so Tortolan Shellraiser looks reasonable.
Nobody, no.
Very strange card to get with the Stonehill Defender.
Tortola, preserve us!
Wow. Okay, that was pretty good.
Armor made to fit.
Alright, so I've got the Ice Block play here with the Valet, but nothing really needs to be dealt 3. And as usual, a very basic thing is if you plan to play the cards anyways, you should play the cards that generate random effects first. Because your plan might change. Maybe you decide to go Potion of Polymorph instead. And in fact, going into turn 5, Potion of Polymorph is pretty good against Taunt Warrior. So we'll go ahead and roll with that.
Runs out on me.
Shells up!
This deck actually comes up with that a lot. You have to think about your entire turn at the beginning of your turn, because there are so many cards that'll discover cards, and you want to, if you plan on playing the cards that draw cards, get random cards, or discover cards, if you were to plan on playing them anyways, then you need to play them first. But it's important not to like go with the rule of thumb of just saying, alright, always play the discover cards or draw cards first. It's only if you intended on playing those cards, then you should play them first. Yeah, bam goes the Potion of Polymorph on a really good target.
Shells up! So fun!
Out of my jungle!
Excuse me, you are on fire.
Shells up! Spells are fun, so fun!
I originally didn't want to play the Valet because I would be putting too much into Brawl, but after evaluating the options, my other choices were to trade one of these, and then it would be weak to deal 1 to all, or to sleep with the fishes, deal 3 to all, that would be damage. So the Medivh is what really carries this deck when you get into the late game. As you can see, it's going to get a lot of value here.
Shells up!
Right away.
And as a note, it was actually proper to play the Medivh Valet, or Medivh the Guardian last there, because I wanted this to buff one of my guys. That happened to buff the perfect target. Never punished. So with that Tiash, needless to say, these cards become incredible. Deal 5 damage, summon a random 5 cost minion, and summon a random 7 cost minion.
Armor made to fit.
And the Pyroblast becomes really good when you summon a 10 cost with it too. Since there are no major targets, I guess I'll just play Alex.
The menagerie is for guests only.
He only drew 1 card with the Curator. And it's because I managed to polymorph his Direhorn Hatchling. Very strong. Here comes the Brawl. That's fine. And they have quite a lot of refuel. And there's a few different ways to close out games against control decks. Nice result. The first of which is Alex drawing him his face and then beating him with the spells at the end. The second of which is getting board control and then possibly sticking Medivh and then outvaluing him, which is the case in this game. Let's Pyroblast the face here. No, let's Pyroblast this. Does 2 less damage, but this takes 2 less damage. Does 2 less damage to his face, but this doesn't take 2 damage. That's what I meant to say. Also, it actually only does 1 less damage because that would gain 2 armor. Oh, hey. I played the Pyroblast over the Meteor because the Pyroblast would summon a 10 drop. That's often worth looking at when you actually have the a TS out. The ice block lets you execute the Alexstrasza and then burn plan quite a lot against a variety of mid to late game decks. And one of the big problems with Taunt Warrior is that they stop gaining armor too after they become Ragnaros. Rogue is an interesting opponent, especially if it's Quest Rogue. You will get outvalued eventually, so this is one of the big matchups to have the plan on burning them out over a series of turns. The Frostbolt is uniquely bad against Rogue in this because they don't run anything that actually you want to kill.
The pleasure is mine.
I had a big breakthrough with this deck, helped by the stream really, because they kept yelling at me for fireballing 5/5s, and I was like, oh, Eureka. That's right, I'm wrong.
The pleasure is mine.
He didn't play any secret on turn 1 though, so it's not even that deck.
Hello.
What card do you use when you discover cards? Do you prefer to use... Which one do you prefer to use first, your card or the discovered card? It actually depends. Think about the information that gives your opponent and decide based off of that. Think we go for this one. Yeah, he doesn't look to be putting up that much pressure. Rogues have no heal, famously.
What to do?
I think I can make it to turn 9 and then play Power Blast, Fire Blast, and then all I would need is one Frostbolt to finish after that. Some interesting choices. I do have Archmage Antonidas and Forbidden Flame somehow, so we'll go with that.
Excuse me, you are on fire.
What a Clown Fiesta.
My hand is too.
I have a combo from 3 cards that aren't even in the deck,
Give me a
combined with one of the cards.
The Brotherhood shall prevail.
Here though, I think I'm going to waste the Forbidden Flame. Yeah, it's kind of important to deal with 6/6. We don't need that Fireball yet. I will rely on drawing a Fireball.
Right away.
I'm just gonna play Archmage Antonidas as a 7-mana 5/7. Oh well.
I'm in charge now. You require my assistance.
We hunger for vengeance.
Alright, so
Again, so kind of you to join me.
I see Mate in 3. No, in 4. Mate in 4. So basically I need to not die in 4 turns. Alexstrasza, Pyroblast.
Tonight, a
Fire
tale
Lens?
of long lost words. Let's dance. Oh!
I bring life and hope.
I wonder if I speed up lethal if I hit him with the stick.
I'm ready.
Yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense.
Everyone has it.
So I need to draw into Ice Block or... I obviously can't Pyroblast without the Ice Block up. 5, 8, 11, 12, 13, 14... Well, I think Primordial Glyph is the right play here. Oh, I could draw Fire... I could draw Frostbolt and win. That's pretty good. Come on! Oh, never rewarded.
One's out on me.
Oh, yes! It might not be enough still. So I guess this is an example of sometimes with Discover Mage, you absolutely have to take some pretty risky lines. And that often comes out to being something like not playing Ice Block or not trying to dig for Ice Block. Because if you try to dig for the Ice Block and you play it, you're just gonna eventually lose. So you might as well squeeze out those small percentage points you can get. This too is part of the skill of Hearthstone. Not playing to a complete dead end, even though it looks suicidal. So if that is Ice Barrier, that puts him at 12. Alright, so here's our aggressive example. Hunters aren't as aggressive as they might seem, but they are certainly an aggressive class in general. The game plan here is pretty simple. Defend, 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 and in late game, outvalue them with basically Firelands, Portal, and AoE. And hopefully you get to survive to play Alex Strausen. That's usually when you win. The tricky part, though, is you have to actually go into the Alex Strausen turn having stabilized the board. That might seem pretty tough to do, and it's kind of tough. But even with all of that, this deck, this matchup is still like it's fair. I wasn't gonna give I was about to give a percentage, but then I realized, should I really call it about 50-50? It's probably close to about 50-50. Give or take. When you're playing this deck, you should just treat just about every deck as about a 50-50 matchup. Because this is truly a jack of all trades deck, master of none. Here I'm in a decent spot because I've entered turn 4 with the opponent having nothing on the board. One of the tricky things against an aggressive matchup is finding that moment where you can actually play Ice Block. And in this case, the opponent only has a 1-1 on the board. Perfect time to throw that thing down. It can be surprisingly important to play the Ice Block when you're at 30 or even when you're like 20. Because even though you're at no risk of dying, eventually you will have need to play that Ice Block. So even though it doesn't develop the board at all, it's kind of a necessary step in the course of the game that you have had played Ice Block. And that'll come up, it'll creep up on you. It'll sneak up on you. Something along those lines. Against an aggressive deck, you don't even have to really push any damage to the face because you win the long game. Which means that all you have to do is really defend, defend, defend. There are times where you will still race them by playing the Alex into the face and then like burning them out. But you'll have to realize you have that particular hand before trying to execute that plan. I think we Fire Blast, Worm, and Ice Barrier. This is an example of where I have Cabal Courier in hand, but I'm not going to play it because even though you want to discover first, It's not in the plans to play the Cabal Courier this turn.
I wonder.
Which is why it's really dangerous to have the mentality of always discover first. Always plan out your whole turn first is probably the better way of putting it. Why am I playing Ice? Yeah, because I need to get that buff on the worm. Yeah, that's pretty important. If I'm at a decent amount of health, I will seriously consider Alexstrasing his face. If I draw Pyroblast, or if I draw Ice Block, or if I draw Arcanologist, all those might be, might move me in that direction. What's especially good in this matchup is if you actually Alexstrasza yourself and your Ice Block isn't broken. So if you're set to something like 2, 3, or 4, or something like that, and you have the Ice Block up. But at the same time, it's a little tricky because you have to make sure that your opponent also doesn't have a board that can just deal 15 again. Because you can get into that position where, yes, you have the Ice Block up, but they're just gonna break it next turn too. So this is pretty much the perfect situation. Got set up perfectly. Where I got to clear off his board mainly and get an 8/8 on the board, and I don't even have the Ice Block broken, and I'm 15 with an Ice Block. That's the dream. And that pretty much always leads to a win. Especially since I still have cards in my hand. He was doing so well with playing around Meteor. It's always important to think about how long you have as well, and you can usually calculate that with the Ice Block. So I have at least 2 turns, which means I always win here. Unless he has Tecton of Flare, which is extremely unusual.
I will mourn.
But it's also very important to like play around cards when you can, so since it's 2-turn lethal anyways, might as well play around, you know, crazy stuff. And I guess that's the deck crushing a few people. Happened to go 6-0 in this Trump teachings, but obviously don't expect to go 6-0. It's a very even matchup against most decks. Even, in theory, but you know, even over a very large sample size of a lot of players playing it, theoretically, if you're a Paladin deck, this deck is favored against every single deck then. Since you move the even matchups to like get those extra percentage points.